It was supposed to take just a few minutes. A short walk, a familiar road, a quiet town where nothing ever seemed to go wrong. But somewhere between a brightly lit sports center and a warm family home, a 13-year-old girl vanished without a trace. No screams were officially reported. No struggle was clearly seen. And by the time anyone realized something was wrong, it was already too late. Before we go any further, take a moment to ask yourself this. How does a child disappear in a place where everyone knows everyone? We unravel real-life mysteries that refuse to stay buried. If stories that challenge everything we think we know about safety, truth, and justice matter to you, consider subscribing and staying with us until the very end. Because this story only gets darker. A quiet town with no reason to fear. Brembate di Sopra is not the kind of place where parents fear letting their children walk alone. Nestled in northern Italy, just outside Milan, the town is small, orderly, and deeply rooted in tradition. With a population of a little over 7,000 people, life there moves slowly. Streets are familiar, faces are known, crime is rare. It was in this town that Yara Gambirasio was born on May 21, 1997. Yara grew up surrounded by family. She had loving parents, an older sister, and 2 younger brothers. The Gambirasio family had lived in Brembate di Sopra for generations. This wasn't just a place on a map. It was home in the deepest sense of the word. By all accounts, Yara was a normal, energetic teenager. She went to the local school, spent time with friends, and had a passion that defined much of her young life: gymnastics. She trained regularly at a large sports complex located only a few hundred yards from her home. It was so close that walking there barely felt like leaving the neighborhood. That sense of safety would later become one of the most haunting elements of this case. November 26, 2010. Friday evenings in Brembate di Sopra were usually quiet. November 26, 2010 was no different, or at least it didn't seem that way at first. Just after 5 p.m., Yara told her parents she needed to stop by the sports center. She wasn't going for a full training session. She only planned to return a stereo to her gymnastics coach. It would be quick. She said she'd be back in about an hour. No one hesitated. There was no argument, no concern. Why would there be? The route was familiar. The area was safe. Yara had walked it countless times before. She left home at approximately 5:15 p.m. That was the last time her parents ever saw her alive. The last confirmed sighting. At around 5:30 p.m., Yara arrived at the sports center. Her presence there is not in question. Multiple people saw her. Her coach confirmed that Yara came in briefly, handed over the stereo, and stayed to chat for a bit. Friends later told police they spoke with her, watched her stretch, and even saw her perform a few casual exercises. Nothing out of the ordinary. She appeared calm, normal, unafraid. Then she left. No one followed her. No one noticed anything strange. She simply walked out of the building and headed toward home, or at least, that's where everyone assumed she was going. At 6:44 p.m., Yara sent a text message to a friend. It was casual and unremarkable, the kind of message teenagers send without thinking twice. But that text would become one of the most critical timestamps in the entire investigation. Because it was the last time anyone ever heard from her. When safe became suspicious. By 7:00 p.m., Yara still hadn't returned home. At first, her parents tried not to panic. Maybe she stayed longer than planned, maybe she was talking with friends. But as the minutes passed, concern began to creep in. At 7:11 p.m., Yara's mother called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. That single detail changed everything. Yara never turned her phone off without telling her parents. Never. And she certainly wouldn't ignore a call from her mother. Within moments, worry turned into fear. The family contacted the police immediately. A search begins. The case was quickly escalated and handed over to a larger police department in a nearby city. An experienced investigator, Detective Letizia Ruggeri, was assigned to lead the search. From the very beginning, Ruggeri understood the urgency. A missing child case is a race against time, and every minute matters. Officers were dispatched to Brembate di Sopra that same evening. The sports center was one of the first places they went. What they discovered there only deepened the mystery. Yara had been seen leaving alone. There were no signs of a struggle, no abandoned belongings, no witnesses who could say for certain what happened next. The path between the gym and Yara's home was short, straightforward, familiar. Yet somewhere along that path, she vanished. And as police began searching the streets, fields, and riverbanks of this quiet town, one terrifying realization started to sink in. Yara Gambirasio didn't just get lost. She didn't wander off. Whatever happened to her happened fast, and whoever was responsible had already disappeared into the night. By the time the sun rose over Brembate di Sopra the next morning, the town no longer felt safe. What had started as a few worried parents and a handful of officers quickly escalated into a full-scale emergency. A 13-year-old girl had vanished without explanation, and every passing hour made the outcome more uncertain. Detective Letizia Ruggeri knew this was no ordinary disappearance. A town under a microscope. Within hours, the search operation intensified. Local police were joined by military police, firefighters, and hundreds of volunteers. Streets were combed inch by inch. Fields were searched. The banks of a nearby river were examined in case Yara had fallen or been pushed. Nothing. Investigators returned to the sports center, determined to reconstruct Yara's final movements minute by minute. Everyone who had been there that evening was questioned again. Staff, coaches, other athletes, parents. Several witnesses recalled seeing a girl who looked like Yara near the entrance, talking to two men beside a red car. It was an unsettling detail, but it couldn't be confirmed. No one could positively identify the men. No license plate was remembered. And in a case already full of uncertainty, this potential lead hovered frustratingly between fact and rumor. Still, Ruggeri refused to dismiss anything. The dogs lead the wrong way. Search dogs were brought in and given Yara's belongings to pick up her scent. Investigators expected the dogs to follow the path from the sports center toward Yara's home. Instead, they did the opposite. The dogs led officers away from her house toward a neighboring town called Mapello. This was the first moment when the case took a disturbing turn. Around the same time, cell phone data arrived, and it confirmed what the dogs had suggested. At 6:49 p.m., just 5 minutes after Yara sent her last text message, her phone connected to a cell tower in Mapello. The distance made one thing clear: she couldn't have walked there in 5 minutes. Yara had been transported. Kidnapping or something else. With this new information, investigators narrowed the possibilities. There were two main theories. 1. Yara had been kidnapped, likely by someone with a vehicle. 2. She had run away. The second theory quickly fell apart. Yara had made plans for the next day. She had no history of running away, no problems at home, no signs of distress. Interviews with friends and relatives revealed nothing unusual. Everything pointed to one horrifying conclusion: Yara had been taken against her will. Now the question wasn't what happened, but who. 15,000 phones, one kidnapper. Detective Ruggeri made a bold decision, one that would define the investigation. She ordered the collection of cell phone location data for every phone that had connected to towers in Mapello on the evening of Yara's disappearance. If a kidnapping had occurred, the perpetrator's phone would almost certainly be among them. The scale was staggering. 15,000 phone numbers. A special team was assembled to monitor and analyze them. Calls were recorded. Movements were tracked. Patterns were scrutinized. Officers listened to thousands of hours of conversations, hoping for even the smallest slip. Days turned into weeks. Nothing. Hope began to fade. The sentence that stopped everything. Then in late November, everything changed. While listening to one of the monitored calls, an officer heard a phrase that sent chills through the room. The man on the line said, "Forgive me, Lord, I didn't kill her." Those words hit like a thunderbolt. Investigators immediately flagged the call and identified the speaker as Mohammed Fikri, a construction worker from Morocco who lived in Mapello, the very town where Yara's phone had last connected. The implications were terrifying. A suspect already gone. Police moved quickly to locate Fikri. Too quickly and too late. Because of the overwhelming number of calls being monitored, recordings were being reviewed with a delay of several days. By the time the suspicious sentence was discovered, Fikri was already on a ship heading back to Morocco. To the investigators, it looked like guilt. Italian authorities ordered the ship to be intercepted. Fikri was arrested and brought back to Italy. The media exploded. For the first time since Yara disappeared, the public believed the nightmare might be nearing an end. The evidence that lied. While Fikri was in custody, investigators searched his car. Inside the trunk, they found a mattress stained with blood. It felt like the final piece of the puzzle. But forensic testing delivered a devastating blow. The blood didn't belong to Yara. It wasn't even human. Then came the most crushing revelation of all. Experts re-examined the phone recording, this time with a proper translation of Fikri's native language. The phrase that had sparked the arrest had been misinterpreted. He hadn't said what investigators thought he said. Fikri was innocent. He was released, and just like that, the case collapsed back into darkness. A nation loses hope. Italy had been watching every development closely. Yara's face was everywhere, on television screens, newspapers, and billboards. Millions prayed for her return. When Fikri was arrested, people celebrated. When he was cleared, the country fell silent. 3 months passed. No body, no suspect, no answers. Detective Ruggieri later admitted she feared they might never find Yara. But on February 26, 2011, in a field miles away, a man flying a remote-controlled airplane was about to uncover the truth and bring an end to the hope that Yara might still be alive. For 3 long months, Italy held its breath. Every day without news felt heavier than the last. Posters faded, search teams thinned, and the question no one wanted to ask grew louder with each passing week. What if Yara Gambirasio was no longer alive? On February 26, 2011, that question was finally answered. An accidental discovery. In a rural area several miles from Brembate di Sopra, a man spent his Saturday afternoon flying a remote-controlled airplane. The fields were quiet, overgrown with tall grass, and rarely visited during winter. When the plane malfunctioned, he guided it down into a thick patch of vegetation to avoid damaging it. As he walked toward the landing spot, something caught his eye. A pile of rags. At first, it didn't seem important. The countryside was full of discarded debris, but then he noticed boots protruding from beneath the fabric. He froze. Moments later, he called the police. The moment everything changed. Officers arrived quickly and uncovered what no one had wanted to find. A human body. The remains were badly decomposed, exposed to the elements for months. Visual identification was nearly impossible. But when Detective Letizia Ruggieri arrived at the scene, she didn't hesitate. She knew. The clothes matched exactly what Yara had been wearing the night she disappeared. Nearby, investigators found Yara's iPad, house keys, SIM card, and the removable battery from her phone. One item was missing: the phone itself. That detail was deliberate. Whoever had done this knew what they were doing. What the body revealed. Italy's most respected forensic pathologist was called in to examine the remains. Her conclusions were chilling. Yara had suffered multiple stab wounds. There were no signs of a prolonged struggle. No defensive injuries that suggested she had been able to fight back. And although some of her clothing had been removed, experts found no evidence of sexual assault. Still, the condition of the body suggested intent. This was not an accident. This was not random violence. This was murder. Fibers, DNA, and a dead end. Forensic teams combed the scene and Yara's clothing with microscopic precision. They discovered fibers embedded in the fabric, fibers commonly used in a specific type of industrial textile. It hinted at a killer who worked in manufacturing or construction. Then came another crucial discovery. 2 foreign DNA samples were found. One on Yara's gloves, another on the battery of her phone. The samples were small, fragile, incomplete. There were no matches in any criminal database. Once again, the investigation hit a wall. The DNA that finally spoke. Just when it seemed there were no more paths to explore, the lab made a breakthrough. Biological material was discovered on Yara's underwear. This time, the sample was sufficient. It produced a full DNA profile, belonging to an unknown male. For the first time since Yara disappeared, investigators were holding something concrete. But DNA alone is useless without a name. A search on an unprecedented scale. Detective Ruggieri launched one of the largest DNA collection efforts in Italian history. Teams were divided and assigned different tasks. Collect samples from Yara's family and friends. Collect samples from everyone connected to the sports center. Analyze cell phone data of individuals who traveled between Brembate di Sopra and Mapello that night. Collect DNA from each potential suspect. The scale was overwhelming. Thousands of samples were taken. Multiple laboratories worked simultaneously. Weeks turned into months. No match. A desperate theory. Running out of options, Ruggeri considered something many investigators would have dismissed. Not far from the field where Yara's body was found stood a nightclub, a place known for attracting individuals with criminal histories and questionable reputations. Killers often returned to familiar areas. It was a long shot, but there were no better leads. Officers were stationed at the club on weekends, discreetly collecting DNA samples from visitors. Membership records allowed investigators to trace past attendance. The odds of success were slim, but then unexpectedly the phone rang. A partial match. One DNA sample showed a partial match to the profile found on Yara's underwear. The man's name was Damiano. He wasn't the killer. That much was quickly confirmed. He was on another continent at the time of Yara's disappearance. But the partial match meant something far more unsettling. The killer was likely related to him. For the first time, investigators weren't just chasing a suspect. They were chasing a family tree, the man who didn't exist. By the time Detective Letizia Ruggeri realized the killer might be hidden somewhere inside a family tree, the investigation had already crossed into uncharted territory. This was before genetic genealogy became a standard tool in criminal cases. What Ruggeri was attempting had almost no precedent in Italy. There was no playbook, no clear path forward. Only one fragile thread to follow. A family connection no one expected. The partial DNA match from the nightclub pointed to Damiano, but he was quickly ruled out. What mattered wasn't where he had been that night. It was who he was related to. As investigators began mapping Damiano's family, they uncovered a stunning coincidence. His mother had once worked as a housekeeper for Yara Gambirasio's family. She had been part of their household for nearly 10 years before leaving the job several years earlier. The revelation shook the investigation, but shock wasn't evidence. The woman was interviewed, and she was genuinely devastated by the suggestion that someone in her family could be involved. There was no indication she was hiding anything. And yet the DNA did not lie. Digging deeper and finding nothing. Ruggeri's team collected DNA from Damiano's immediate relatives. None matched. That should have ended the theory. But it didn't. Because the partial DNA match suggested something more complicated. The killer was related, but not closely. This meant expanding the search outward, far outward. Cousins, distant relatives. Branches of the family that hadn't been spoken to in decades. Months passed. The media grew impatient. Politicians openly criticized Ruggeri, accusing her of incompetence and wasted resources. Some called for her removal from the case. She refused to stop. Back to the past. Investigators began reconstructing family trees using church registries, civil records, and archival documents, some dating back to 1716. Thousands of names were reviewed. Again and again, leads collapsed. Then in September 2011, something unexpected happened. One of the reconstructed family lines led to a man, already deceased, referred to here as Giuseppe. He couldn't be the killer, but when experts managed to extract DNA from preserved personal items belonging to him, the result was undeniable. He was almost certainly the father or grandfather of the killer. The sons who weren't the answer. Giuseppe had two known sons. Investigators collected their DNA. The result was another crushing disappointment. Neither man was the killer. There was only one explanation left, one that few wanted to confront. Giuseppe had fathered a child outside his marriage, a child his family may never have known about. A secret buried for decades. Finding proof of an affair from decades earlier was nearly impossible. Detectives interviewed thousands of people who might have known Giuseppe, former co-workers, friends, acquaintances, anyone who might remember something unusual. Almost a year passed with no progress. Then a detail surfaced that changed everything. For years, Giuseppe had taken annual trips alone to a spa complex near Milan, staying there every May for 2 weeks, always without his wife. The record still existed. Investigators obtained visitor logs from the spa dating back to the 1960s. They began cross-referencing names. The search that went public. The process was slow, meticulous, and exhausting, and when journalists learned what police were doing, the story exploded. Speculation ran wild across Italy. reporters began uncovering stories of secret children born from extramarital affairs. In some villages, multiple cases surfaced. The pressure intensified. Still, Ruggery pressed on. The mother. In the summer of 2014, nearly 4 years after Yara disappeared, a tip finally stood out. A woman named Esther Artioli. Investigators reviewed their records and realized something shocking. They had already collected her DNA 2 years earlier. At the time, she had been ruled out, but Ruggery ordered the test repeated. This time the results were undeniable. A catastrophic error had been made during the original comparison. Esther was the killer's mother. One final name. Esther had 3 children, including male twins who fit the killer's age profile. Although they were officially considered the children of Esther's husband, investigators now believed Giuseppe was the biological father. Attention turned to one man in particular. He was 42 years old, a construction worker, married with children, living in Mapello, the same town where Yara's phone signal had disappeared. His name was Massimo Bossetti, but proving it would require one final, delicate move. The verdict that divided a nation. For nearly 4 years, the name Massimo Bossetti meant nothing to the public. He was an ordinary man by every visible measure. A construction worker, a husband, a father. He blended into daily life so completely that even investigators had passed by him without noticing. But in the summer of 2014, that changed. The DNA that couldn't be ignored. Detective Letizia Ruggeri knew that one wrong move could destroy everything. If Bossetti realized he was under suspicion, he could disappear, destroy evidence, or lawyer up before police had what they needed. So they waited. They learned his routines, his habits, the roads he drove every day. Then they set a trap that looked completely ordinary. A routine roadside sobriety checkpoint. Bossetti was stopped like any other driver. He complied, unaware that the breathalyzer he blew into would quietly capture what investigators had spent years searching for: his DNA. The sample was rushed to the lab. When the results came back, there was no room for doubt. The DNA from the breathalyzer perfectly matched the biological material found on Yara Gambirasio's underwear. After almost 4 years, the investigation had its answer. The arrest. On June 16, 2014, Massimo Bossetti was arrested. Italy erupted. Some felt relief, others felt disbelief. How could a man with no criminal record, no known connection to Yara, be responsible for such a brutal crime? Bossetti denied everything. He insisted he had never seen Yara, never spoken to her, never harmed her. The case went to trial. Evidence that built a wall. As prosecutors prepared their case, disturbing details began to emerge. Bossetti's internet history showed searches of an inappropriate nature involving minors, conducted on the very evening Yara disappeared. Cell phone data placed him in Brembate di Sopra that night. His phone was switched off at 5:45 p.m. and remained off until the next morning. Surveillance footage captured a vehicle matching his, notably without license plates, near the sports center just minutes before Yara vanished. Fibers from Bossetti's car seats matched those found on Yara's body. Witnesses came forward. One woman testified that she saw a car speeding through her street that evening. Inside, she saw a child. She heard screams. The car resembled Bossetti's. The lies unravel. Bossetti claimed he had been home with his family at the time of the disappearance, but the evidence said otherwise. His co-workers testified he hadn't worked that day, despite his claim that he had. CCTV footage contradicted his story. Cell tower data placed him near the crime scene. The defense tried everything. They argued that Bossetti suffered frequent nosebleeds, suggesting his blood could have transferred indirectly. They challenged the DNA evidence, claiming it belonged to a genetic lineage shared by many relatives. Experts dismantled those arguments one by one. The match was conclusive. The bombshell. Then, in a dramatic twist, the defense introduced a new suspect, a gym instructor named Sylvia. Experts had found her blood on the sleeve of Yara's jacket. Sylvia's father testified that she had come home crying the night Yara disappeared. Investigators also learned she had exchanged messages with her brother that evening, messages both later deleted. Sylvia claimed she couldn't remember why her blood was on Yara's clothing, why she was crying, or what the messages contained. In court, she repeatedly said only 3 words: "I don't know." The revelations stunned the public, but they weren't enough. The sentence. In the summer of 2016, after years of investigation and months of trial, the court delivered its verdict. Massimo Bossetti was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Appeals followed. None succeeded. A case that still haunts. Even after the verdict, questions lingered. Bossetti's wife later confessed that none of their children were biologically his, a revelation that added yet another layer of tragedy to an already complex case. Some continue to question the conviction. They point to Sylvia, to procedural errors, to the sheer improbability of the DNA journey. But Italy's highest courts upheld the ruling. Every piece of evidence was reviewed by leading experts. Bossetti remains behind bars, and Yara Gambirasio remains a symbol of innocence lost, of relentless investigation, and of a mystery so complex it changed forensic history in Italy forever. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more real cases that challenge everything we think we know about crime and justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us. Because some stories may end in court, but they never truly end in our minds.